If you go back in history, the first lighthouse in the world goes back to something like 350 BC in Alexandria. And that was simply a fire on top of a block structure. And of course, then over the years, we moved to blubber and then kerosene and gas. And now we're with electricity. And we don't have to have people in the lighthouses anymore to carry supplies up to light them. And you don't have to have anybody around at all with the solar energy taking care of them.
Let's take a step back in time to the early 1800s. America was growing at a record pace, including Wisconsin. The railroad system was still in its infancy, so the best way to transport goods was via merchant ships. The economy was dependent on these ships to deliver everything from building materials to trade goods and supplies. Green Bay's access to the Great Lakes waterway provided an ideal gateway for importing and exporting between Wisconsin and the East Coast.
Green Bay is very shallow. It's a shallow-based bay because the river flows to the north, and the amount of sediment that comes out of the river, it's a long river. It has a lot of sediment that comes down from Lake Winnebago. So they needed to have the ability to have schooners and ships come in. You know, originally it was canoes and flat-bottom boats kind of things, but then there was a reason for a port. And so gradually, and it's one of the best ports on the lake on this side because it shortens the distance into the interior of the state. In addition, the river flowed into the bay, and it was fur trading and lumber and natural resources that went out of here. And so that's why it was important to have a good port here. It made it an advantageous point.
Green Bay was a hub for a lot of lumber products and that sort of thing back in the day. If you look at the 1854 chart, the direct ships coming in of the peninsula to head for the lighthouse that is on Longtail Point, and at that time it was called Longtail Point. And it was a fieldstone lighthouse, and once they reached visibility of that, then they would make a sharp turn to the southeast and head into the channel. And there was a lot of maneuvering to get into the channel and into the mouth of the river. It just made sense, instead of all this meandering around sand points and that sort of thing, is to just cut a channel through to the mouth of the river.
The first dredging occurred in 1867 to take the harbor 200 feet wide, 13 feet deep, all the way out to Grassy Island, which was then the natural drop-off in terms of the lake taking over in terms of depth. You know, and then there were 670 ships coming in and going, and you figure that's basically a 6-month shipping period. That's a lot of stuff coming and going, even on schooners.
To make it logical, they needed the range lights to bring the ships in. And that's where the Grassy Island Range Lights came into being, is that when a ship came down, they could then pick up the lights, and that would guide them through the new channel coming into the mouth of the river. So it made sense. The boats just didn't have to do the meandering. It was a lot safer for the navigators to come into the mouth of the river.
There was a large sandbar there right in the middle of the route from the boats coming in here. And so the boats would have to go around that always. And I think that was probably in 1872. The Corps of Engineers did a study, and they decided to put these 2 range lights there. And then they dredged the channel, which they could come straight through. And the range lights, kind of being a range light, the lower one, the forward one low, and then the next one high. You just line them 2 lights up and you come in, you know.
A special committee of the Lighthouse Board sent to the Great Lakes determined that lights were needed at the entrance to the Fox River. Congress approved $11,000 for the project, and work on the Grassy Island Range Lights finally began in the spring of 1872. A 25-foot-tall lower light at the northern end of the pier was topped with an octagonal cast-iron lantern and equipped with a fixed white 6th-order Fresnel lens. Its light was visible for a distance of 11 miles in clear weather. 676 feet away, the upper light stood 10 feet taller and was outfitted with a similar lens. This light was visible for 13 miles.
When they were in use, they're of course for navigational use, and the unique characteristic of range lights is to help the people navigating boats stay in a channel by watching how those lights line up. They steer the boat according to that.
A two-story keeper's house was built approximately 100 feet to the north of the upper light, along with a boathouse, outhouse, and woodshed. Without a doubt, the lighthouses would go on to save countless lives, but they couldn't have done it without their keepers. Life for these keepers wasn't easy. In addition to their daily routine of trimming wicks, replenishing kerosene, and regular maintenance, keepers had to be on the lookout 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They endured sometimes brutal weather conditions and worked in shifts with assistant keepers. Sometimes the entire family would contribute to the keepers' work. Speaking of brutal conditions, imagine the relief sailors must have felt when they saw the first dim glow of a lighthouse on the horizon, promising safe harbor and a successful conclusion to their arduous journey. After all, thousands of schooners passed through the channel at the end of a circuitous and often treacherous route. From the crashing waves of the Great Lakes waterway to gale-force gusts on Green Bay, sailors risked their lives on every journey.
To me, the reality is, what are they about? Saving lives. Pure and simple. They're about saving lives. They're not just because they're pretty.
Those are things that keep us safe on the water. You know, it's a navigation structure. It's something that we look for when conditions aren't so good to keep you from running aground. So I guess, and lighthouses always have a kind of a special allure to them for, certainly if you're on the water and you see one, it gives you a sense of comfort. And if you see them from the land, it's just pretty. They're just fun to watch.
Without the lighthouses, you wouldn't have hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks. You'd have thousands and thousands of shipwrecks because boats wouldn't know where to go. And it's especially important, I think, in areas like Green Bay and the Great Lakes, where you have so many shoal areas. A lot of people don't realize how shallow the Bay of Green Bay is for miles, actually. If you know where you're going, you can literally walk probably 15, 16 miles in the Bay of Green Bay. It's that shallow.
While they served their function honorably, the lighthouses would be at risk of extinction in the upcoming century. When acetylene lights with automatic sun valves were installed in both ranges in 1934, the attention of a keeper was no longer necessary. And at 66 years of age, the last keeper of the Grassy Island Range, Louis Hutzler, retired from service. With the advancement of radar and modern navigation systems, the range lights had long since outlived their purpose. In 1966, the decision was made to destroy the Grassy Island Range Lights and widen the channel through what was left of the west side of Grassy Island. Hearing of the Coast Guard's plans for the historic beacons, Green Bay Yacht Club members sprung into action to save the historic beacons.
They really served for many decades and were decommissioned in the early 60s, at which time the Corps of Engineers decided that the ships were getting too big and the decommissioned lights and Grassy Island Range Lights were just in the way, and something needed to happen, and they were going to burn the lighthouses because they needed to widen the channel. And fortunately, one of the Commodores at the Green Bay Yachting Club said, "No, you can't do that." They boated by those for years, and it was part of the heritage of the area.
It was the Corps of Engineers that was managing them at that time, and they moved them from the island, which is a mile and a half from here, and onto the yacht club property.
So for the price of $1 each, the Green Bay Yachting Club purchased these lighthouses. The Corps of Engineers picked them up by the catwalk around the lighthouses, set them on a barge and brought them in and set them on the north side of our harbor. And there they sat for 20, almost 30 years.
The lights were given a new lease on life when they were relocated to the yacht club property. After 20 years of weathering the elements, the lighthouses were deteriorating, and the integrity of the support system was declining. The Green Bay Yacht Club began making plans to destroy them. But Merlin Bainan was determined to save the historic structures. He requested permission from the Green Bay Yacht Club to rebuild the footing of the now leaning lighthouse, and also agreed to pay the expenses out of his own pocket.
I was on the board of directors here at the yacht club, and it was brought up at the meeting that the larger one here was tipping over. It was attached to the yacht club, and it was the bottom filled in with ground and the bottom rotted off, and it was tipping over. It was pulling loose from the yacht club, and so the board decided to have them destroyed. And then I asked permission to restore them, and they accepted it. They gave me them, and they just mentioned that I would have to pay the cost of them to do it, you know.
In 1992, the U.S. Coast Guard in Green Bay asked the Green Bay Yacht Club to move the lighthouse located on its property at the mouth of the harbor in order to make room for the new Coast Guard station. The lighthouse again faced demolition when the Green Bay Yacht Club gave the Coast Guard permission to destroy it. Once more, Merlin appealed to the Green Bay Yacht Club to allow restoration. This time, Merlin joined forces with David Nelson, and they moved the light 100 feet east and placed it on the Green Bay Yacht Club property. In 1995, Green Bay Yacht Club built a new clubhouse and needed to find a permanent home for both lighthouses. In response, a plan was devised to permanently place the lighthouses on the existing breakwall.
When the club decided to build this clubhouse that we're in now, they thought about the lighthouses, and general opinion was, they're old, they're kind of junky, we'll just trash them. But there was a small set of folks here who said, no, we can't do that, too much history, we'll hold on to them, we'll take care of them. And so several people were involved back then, but the ones who stayed with it were Dave Nelson and Merle Bainan, and they're the ones who really led to what you see out there today.
And one night, Dave and Rita were over to the boat for dinner, and after dinner, Dave and I were sitting on the back of the boat overlooking this point here. All this was rocks, about a foot higher than the water. And of course we're having our gin, and Dave says, what are we going to do with the lighthouses? And I says, you know, we could move them out on that point out there, and then we could line them up kind of as they were before. And he thought for a second or so, and he says, can you do that? Yeah, I says, I can do that. Well, he said, if you do that, I'll pay for it. And so we shook hands and had another gin, I suppose, maybe a couple, and then we started planning.
Unfortunately, the breakwall had been damaged in the past by severe storms. Undeterred, Merlin and David committed themselves to the breakwall project.
And that's where the association of Merlin and David began, with the movement of the lights to where they are today and the restoration. Quite a project.
I said, well, we can't just put them on top of the rocks. We have to drive piling on the corner and stabilize it. And he says, you can do it, go ahead. And then I got bids on driving piling here, and so we drove the piling, which took about a year or so, and then we jacked them up and put skids under them where they were over there on that side, and then we dragged them over here with my backhoe.
And over that period of time, an awful lot of money and effort was put in to, number one, stabilize the breakwall as it was at that time. It was all just rotten concrete and falling into the river, etc. The process began, and I don't know that they understood how much rot was in. For almost 30 years, they kind of oozed themselves into the ground. So as they were picked up and moved over here, there was an awful lot of work that needed to be done to replace the rotten timbers and with new timbers and set them on the foundations. Back when the lighthouse process started and they were moving them from the north side of the harbor up the roadway here to where they currently reside, And David was concerned because the taller of the two lights was starting to tip. And he was concerned that they were going to fall over. And I thought at the time when David told me that, I said, the lady was doing a dance because she knew she was going home.
The endeavor solidified the partnership between Merlin and David, and in 1995 they formed their team of lighthouse keepers. Fortunately, with the lure of rewards, Merlin was able to recruit skilled lighthouse keepers to help with the renovation.
I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I like woodworking. Always interested in learning more how to be self-sufficient type deal. So they said, yeah, come on out Tuesday, 4 o'clock. We work until 8, and then we have rewards. And I'm going, oh, what's this rewards thing? And he said, oh, well, we always sit down and chat, and we have a gin. Not really a martini, but it's really close. It has ice. So I thought, okay, that's a pretty good deal. And I got involved with repairing the lighthouses under those programs. And I thought, this is a pretty good deal. These are historic lighthouses. They ultimately became on the registry for the state of Wisconsin and the United States as historic structures. My thought was a good legacy. And Merle said, well, as you repair some of the stuff, you put some of the stuff back together with new material, he says, put your name on the back side of it. Sign it and date it. So, in the last many years, I've got my name all over those lighthouses. And I'm really excited that I have a bit of heritage in those lighthouses, that they will go on. And it's a piece of history for Green Bay that will always be there, I hope, and be cherished as part of the Green Bay heritage and the history of the United States. I mean, we're going back to when, before Custer had his last stand, that these lighthouses were out here. And I go like, that's really cool.
During the renovation, the keepers discovered that the years had taken a serious toll on the structures.
The lighthouses were in a great state of disrepair. The bottom 2 feet, at least the bottom 2 feet of the lighthouses were just totally rotted out. You had open gaps of 3/4 of a foot to a foot. Obviously, water just poured in the snow during the wintertime, and they were at great risk of falling down, even though we had tied them together to move them. They still needed to have all that rebuilt. So we had to rebuild the bottom couple of feet, tear all the the shingles off and reshingle the lighthouses. Glass was either cracked up above where the lights are. It was either cracked, or bullet holes were shot through the glass. Iron was rotted all around. That all had to be replaced.
But there were good surprises, too. One was when they found the original shingles under the deteriorating siding. The importance of this discovery dates back nearly 200 years.
In the 1870s, Green Bay was the shingle capital of the world because the farmers that were clearing the land in the area, in the summer they were farming and clearing land, and in the winter they were creating shingles. And so all those shingles had to go out of here by boat, and there were millions of shingles that were produced in Brown, Kewanee, close to proximity to where they could get it to the harbor to ship them out.
The discovery of those original shingles added even more historic significance to the lighthouses. The renovation also uncovered copper roofs that had been hidden by layers of materials over time.
The domes that you see, which are now pretty nice copper shining looking domes, had a coating on them, and that was not original. Originally they are pretty much the way they are now, but the Coast Guard at one time or another, probably to stop the leaking, put the coating over it.
We decided, Tom Ropes and Dick Hines and myself, that we would clean those roofs up. And it took us 3-4 months per roof to get that paint off, and they ended up very, very nice copper. Yeah.
The passage of time made restoration difficult and time-consuming, but the beautiful gleaming tops made it clear that the effort was well worth it. However, if it weren't for the dedication and perseverance of Merlin Bainan and David Nelson, the lighthouses would have been lost to history. They decided that the existing deteriorating breakwall would have to be replaced to ensure the long-term stability of the lighthouses. In 1998, the North Lighthouse was moved to its permanent home on the newly reconstructed breakwall, followed by the South Lighthouse in 1999.
When we got to do this park, they moved the lighthouses completely off, and then they dug them way down and put the seawall in and did it right. And right, like so I say, they should be here for another 100, 200 years if, they don't get struck by lightning.
In 2004, the Grassy Island Lighthouses received well-deserved recognition when they were accepted into the Wisconsin State Historic Register and into the National Historic Register the following year.
The National Register of Historic Places is wonderful listing. It lets people know that you have something of some significance and importance to a community. Sometimes it's architectural, sometimes it's historical, sometimes it's the individual that's involved. This certainly is in terms of history and architecture, I'm sure, and the importance to the community in terms of commerce.
David Nelson passed away in 2017, but he and his wife left behind a generous endowment for community projects, including his beloved lighthouses.
David was a lighthouse guy. When he passed, the first project that was part of the fund of the David and Rita Nelson Fund within that was to fund the restoration, if you will, of the breakwall upon which the lighthouses stand. And so it was announced of the amount of money that was established in the fund in excess of $100 million. We were blown away. We knew David was well off. We didn't know how well. And but the first benefactor from that fund was the Grassy Island Range Lights to the tune of $2.6 million. So it was initially before the foundation and the fund, the David and Rita Nelson Fund. We weren't sure we were going to be able to accomplish the project as it stands today. We know we couldn't have done what we have today had it not been for that. But we've made a start. It was fun.
However, if it weren't for the dedication and perseverance of Merlin Bainan and David Nelson, the lighthouses would have been lost to history.
Merle Bainan is a character. I mean, I've known him since I joined here. He is a can-do kind of guy. He was an electrical contractor his whole life. There's nothing he can't really do if he puts his mind to it. So he managed to keep people's interest up and recruit new members to join, to help out there. He always managed to put together a work plan to some of the problems there were, to my view, were insurmountable. Those things were built in the mid-1800s, so some of the structures there were just a mess. And he always found a way to make them as good as new, and keep the ball rolling.
Merle is one of the nicest guys you ever met. He gets something on his mind, he's going to complete it. There's no doubt about it. He gets it done.
Merle Bainan, it's been almost his life's passion. His wife Fatima says that those are his two mistresses. He spends more time with his mistresses than with her. But of course she's joking. She's a sweetheart. But Merle it is his passion. And he spends a lot of time out there and at the club here.
He's the glue. He keeps it all together and keeps everybody going, and he'll be like, no, you do this, do that, and it's like, okay, yep. It's good though. Every place needs that.
I had confidence in him. I know they were going to do a good job. I know that. He's very determined. When he makes up his mind to do something, no matter what, he's going to do it. And that's why he did this. He made up his mind 40-some years, and he's just enjoyed doing it. I really wasn't all happy about it, because you know, my housework. The house needs some attention too. But he's determined that this is going to be it. And I'm so proud of him because they're it.
David is the guy that gave us the inspiration, if you will, and just a super neat guy, a lot of fun. But David was one of those guys that if he said this is what's going to happen, it happened.
But Dave was really a figurehead for the group too. He's always been quite a leader, both in the business world and here, and was able to keep people's interest up, I think, and always came to bat for the project when it needed it. So certainly without him on the administrative side and financing side, and then Merle on the project leadership side, that was the team that made this whole thing work. The rest of us were just minions.
It's so hard to really describe him because he was good to everybody. He was one of those guys always there for you. And he sure was there for us with the lighthouses.
You know, David was a very successful businessman with his ties to the Appleton Post-Crescent, the Press Gazette, radio stations, travel companies, and very well to do, but he never showed it. Dave was just a really down-to-earth guy, but he had a love for the lighthouses.
Today, the lighthouses welcome the Green Bay Yacht Club members and visitors, just as they did those sailors almost 150 years ago. They're a popular stop on Door County Lighthouse boat tours, bus tours, and for lighthouse enthusiasts of all ages. Visitors who come to the Welcome Center can learn more about the history of Grassy Island Range Lighthouses and browse for souvenirs from this unique destination. Since they were first erected, the lighthouses have been on an unusual journey of their own. They've faced deterioration from brutal weather conditions and destruction from those who didn't value their historical significance. Fortunately, the next generation of lighthouse keepers refused to let that happen. An important piece of Green Bay's maritime history has been preserved for generations of visitors and keepers to come. This is their legacy.
Somebody had to do it. Yeah, Dave says that one time the question was asked to him, and he said, because we're crazy, you know. Yeah. But I truly liked them at the yacht club here. I seen them here, and I had put a light in this one some 20 years back, 25 years back. I had a light in there, you know, make it look nice, and then I occasionally would go up and look at them, but never thought that we would do this until they were going to scrap them.
I'm not sure anybody even really knew who Merle was or who Dave Nelson was, you know, but said, well, it sounds like these guys know what they're doing, you know. And they did, obviously.
I believe that they are the only remaining two wooden lighthouses on the Great Lakes. Yeah, most of them are all made out of masonry or steel. These are the two remaining ones, and the fact that they're still here yet that's wonderful, I believe, you know. And I've had, I would say, 50 people join me, help me. Some for a couple of days, some for a couple of weeks, some for a month, couple of months. But all in all, it's these people that made this work, you know.
Well, it's an impressive project in the fact that a small group is responsible for working years on these things to restore them from near destruction, you know.
I've always been taken, when I'm inside them, how they were built originally, the size and shape of the timbers that are in there, the way they constructed things back then is really stunning. A lot of it has been replaced by our group because wood rots, you know, it's over 100 years old, well over 100 years old. But what those guys did back in the mid-1800s to build them was really something special, and they clearly meant it to last a long time. And as we see, that worked out with a little care.
History. If we don't learn anything from what has happened in the past, where are we going down the road? History is significant, and the value that these lighthouses have done for Green Bay and to preserve that history long term. We need young people to follow suit, take over and manage the facilities as David and Merlin have done from the beginning.